Chapter 1. First Impressions. The massive diplomatic chamber aboard the orbital diplomatic hub was a marvel of intergalactic engineering. Designed to accommodate species of all shapes and sizes, its domed ceiling towered high above the delegates, while its walls shimmered with holographic displays showcasing peaceful vistas from across the galaxy. It was the kind of place meant to inspire collaboration, but for Jack Carter, the towering human diplomat, and Terran, the diminutive warrior of the Scolari Empire, the mood was anything but harmonious. Terran entered the chamber flanked by two of her elite guards, their presence commanding despite their small stature. At just over 4 feet tall, Terran embodied the essence of her people. Fierce, agile, and utterly unimpressed by the lumbering creatures they referred to as giants. Her crystalline green armor caught the light as she marched forward, her sharp, predatory eyes scanning the human delegation. She stopped in front of Jack, the appointed negotiator for humanity, and crossed her arms. Jack, towering at 6'2", had seen his fair share of alien species, but none quite like the Scolari. Known for their incredible combat skills and their technological ingenuity, they were a species that humans had learned to tread carefully around. The Scolari were small, yes, but anyone foolish enough to underestimate them often didn't live to regret it. Terran tilted her head, her iridescent, insect-like wings flickering in annoyance. So this is the human negotiator? I expected someone more imposing. Jack raised an eyebrow, fighting back a grin. He had been briefed on the Scolari's penchant for arrogance, especially when dealing with outsiders. And I expected someone taller, he replied smoothly, his tone light but laced with a hint of challenge. Terran's piercing gaze narrowed, her wings twitching with irritation. Size means nothing when skill dominates, she shot back. Her voice was sharp, yet melodic, like the chime of a distant bell. Good thing I came here to talk, not wrestle, Jack quipped. Though I hear humans are pretty good at that too. A smirk tugged at the corner of Terran's mouth, though she quickly suppressed it. We'll see, she said, her voice carrying an undertone of amusement. But don't mistake diplomacy for weakness, human. Jack nodded, his grin softening into a more neutral expression. Fair enough. Let's get to work. The dispute. The conflict between the Scolari and humanity centered around Erythian 5, a mineral-rich moon located in a contested sector of space. For centuries, the moon had been untouched, its resources left to slumber beneath its rocky surface. But recent advancements in mining technology had made Erythian 5's precious minerals accessible, and both the Scolari and humans had laid claim to it. Terran's people argued that the moon fell within their ancestral territory, citing ancient star maps as evidence. The humans, on the other hand, claimed that the moon was uninhabited and therefore free for colonization under interstellar law. With both sides unwilling to back down, tensions had escalated to the brink of war. The diplomatic hub was supposed to provide a neutral ground for negotiations, but it quickly became clear that finding common ground would be anything but easy. Terran, as the Scolari's chief warrior and representative, was fiercely protective of her people's claim. Jack, representing the United Terran Alliance, was equally determined to secure the moon's resources for humanity's expansion. For hours, they debated in the chamber, their words cutting through the air like blades. Jack admired Terran's eloquence and passion, even as her relentless stubbornness frustrated him. Terran, meanwhile, found herself begrudgingly impressed by Jack's calm demeanor and sharp wit. Despite their differences, both recognized that the other was no fool. An uneasy truce. As the negotiations stretched into the evening, tensions in the chamber began to ease, if only slightly. Jack suggested a temporary truce. Humanity would halt its mining operations on Erythian 5 for 3 months, giving both sides time to gather more evidence and present their claims to an intergalactic tribunal. Terran, though reluctant, agreed to the proposal on the condition that the Scolari be allowed to patrol the moon's orbit to ensure compliance. It's not a perfect solution, Jack admitted as they finalized the terms, but it's better than open conflict. Terran regarded him thoughtfully. You surprise me, human, she said. You're not as foolish as I expected. And you're not as unreasonable as I expected, Jack replied with a faint smile. Terran raised an eyebrow. Don't get used to it. A clash of cultures. After the meeting adjourned, Terran and her guards invited Jack to join them for a traditional Scolari meal aboard their ship. It was a rare gesture of goodwill, and Jack accepted out of curiosity. The Scolari vessel was a masterpiece of engineering, its sleek design and intricate carvings reflecting their culture's artistic sensibilities. Inside, the dining hall was adorned with bioluminescent flora, casting a soft, ethereal glow over the room. Terran's people gathered around a long, low table, their wings shimmering like gemstones in the light. The meal consisted of an array of dishes made from Scolari-grown ingredients, each one bursting with vibrant colors and intense flavors. Jack struggled to hide his discomfort as he bit into a fruit that tasted like a mix of fire and ice, the sensation both exhilarating and overwhelming. Terran watched him with amusement, her own plate nearly empty. "Too much for you, human?" she teased, her smirk returning. Jack coughed, his face red. "Let's just say your food has character." The room erupted in laughter, and for the first time, Jack saw a glimpse of the Scolari's more playful side. Terran's laughter was surprisingly warm, a stark contrast to her usual sharp demeanor. A shared moment. After the meal, Jack and Terran found themselves alone in one of the ship's observation lounges. The vast expanse of space stretched out before them, the stars twinkling like distant beacons. Terran leaned against the railing, her expression uncharacteristically soft. "Your people and mine are so different," she said quietly. "Yet here we are, trying to find common ground." Jack joined her, his gaze fixed on the stars. "Maybe we're not as different as we think," he said. "We both want the same thing for our people to thrive. We just have different ways of going about it." Terran glanced at him, her golden eyes reflecting the starlight. "You're not what I expected, Jack Carter. Most humans I've met are arrogant, reckless, but you're different." Jack chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It wasn't meant as one," Terran replied, though her smirk betrayed her teasing tone. For a moment, they stood in silence, the weight of their responsibilities momentarily forgotten. It was a fleeting moment of peace, but one that neither of them would forget. Chapter 2. Tensions and Trust. The uneasy truce forged between the Scolari and humans was fragile at best. Though both sides had agreed to suspend mining operations on Erythian 5, the tension between the two factions lingered like a storm on the horizon. For Jack Carter and Terran, their newfound camaraderie was a small victory in the grand scheme of intergalactic politics, but it was also a dangerous balancing act. Terran's people remained skeptical of her willingness to negotiate with a human. Meanwhile, Jack's superiors in the United Terran Alliance warned him not to get too close to the Scolari warrior. "Keep your relationship professional," his commanding officer had said, his tone laced with suspicion. "We don't need you going soft on them." But Jack couldn't help but respect Terran. Beneath her sharp wit and fierce demeanor, he saw a leader who cared deeply for her people, someone who carried the weight of an entire species on her small but powerful shoulders. Terran, for her part, found herself increasingly intrigued by Jack. His size still struck her as comically unwieldy. He towered over her people like a gentle giant, but his intelligence and restraint set him apart from the humans she had encountered before. She hated to admit it, but she was beginning to enjoy his company. A breach of trust. The uneasy peace was shattered 3 weeks later. A Scolari patrol ship orbiting Erythian 5 detected unauthorized mining activity in a remote sector of the moon. Terran was summoned to the bridge of her ship, the Emberfang, where her second-in-command, Karn, awaited her. "Another human mining rig," Karn said, his voice cold. "They're breaking the truce." Terran's jaw tightened as she studied the holographic display. The rig was small, clearly an attempt to extract resources without drawing attention. Her wings twitched with anger. "Have they sent any explanation?" "No communication," Karn replied. "What should we do, Commander?" Terran's instinct screamed for action, but she hesitated. She had promised to work with Jack to avoid escalation, and she wasn't ready to abandon that trust. "Hold your fire," she said. "I'll speak to Carter first." Karn scowled. "You're wasting time. The humans don't respect us. They never have. They'll respect us more if we show restraint," Terran shot back. "Prepare a secure channel to the Eclipse." The call. Jack was in the middle of a strategy meeting with his crew when Terran's face appeared on the ship's comm screen. Her expression was cold, her golden eyes blazing with fury. "Carter," she said sharply. Explain why your people are mining on Erythian 5 in violation of the truce. Jack's stomach sank. What are you talking about? Don't play coy with me, Terran snapped. We've detected a rig in Sector 7. If you can't control your people, I will. Jack held up a hand, his tone calm but firm. Let me look into it. If it's unauthorized, I'll shut it down. You have 1 hour, Terran said, her voice like steel. If I don't hear from you by then, I'll assume the rig is hostile. The screen went dark, leaving Jack to grapple with the situation. He ordered his team to pull up satellite feeds of the area, and sure enough, there it was. A small mining rig, its drills tearing into the moon's surface. Who authorized this? Jack demanded, his frustration mounting. No one, sir, his lieutenant replied. It must be an independent operation. Jack cursed under his breath. Independent operators, rogue corporations, and prospectors were a constant thorn in the Alliance's side. They didn't care about treaties or diplomacy. They cared about profit. Prep a dropship, Jack said. I'm going down there. The confrontation. Jack arrived at the mining site just as Terran and her squad descended from the Emberfang. Her guards moved like shadows, their crystalline armor glinting in the pale moonlight. Terran herself strode forward with the confidence of a predator, her gaze fixed on Jack. You're cutting it close, Carter, she said, her voice dangerously low. Jack raised his hands in a gesture of peace. I'm here to shut it down. These aren't sanctioned miners, they're independents. They don't represent the Alliance. Terran's expression didn't soften. And yet they're humans. Their actions reflect on you. Jack nodded. I get it. But give me a chance to fix this. Before Terran could respond, a shot rang out. One of the independent miners had panicked, firing a plasma bolt in their direction. The Scolari guards reacted instantly, drawing their weapons, but Jack stepped between them and the miners. Hold your fire, he shouted. We're not here to fight. Terran's wings flared, her voice cutting through the chaos. Your people shot first, Carter. If you can't control them, I will. Jack turned to the miners, his tone hard. Stand down. Now. Reluctantly, the miners lowered their weapons, their faces pale with fear. Jack turned back to Terran, his voice quieter. Let me handle this. An uneasy resolution. It took hours of tense negotiations, but Jack managed to convince the miners to abandon their operation. The Scolari guards dismantled the rig, ensuring it wouldn't be used again. As the last piece of equipment was loaded onto a transport, Jack and Terran stood alone at the edge of the site. You kept your word, Terran said, her tone begrudgingly respectful. Perhaps you're not as useless as I thought. Jack smirked. And you're not as unreasonable as I thought. Terran arched an eyebrow. Careful, Carter. Flattery will get you nowhere. They stood in silence for a moment, the tension between them giving way to something softer. Jack glanced down at her, his expression thoughtful. You know, for someone who thinks humans are clumsy and oversized, you seem to enjoy proving me wrong. Terran's smirk returned, but there was a flicker of something warmer in her golden eyes. Don't get used to it. As they returned to their ships, both couldn't help but feel that something had shifted between them, something neither was ready to admit, but neither could ignore. Chapter 3. A Deeper Threat. The atmosphere between Jack Carter and Terran had changed after the mining incident. Their mutual respect had grown, but it was wrapped in a layer of denial. Both were too stubborn to admit how much the other's actions had begun to influence them. However, the truce between humanity and the Scolari was still fragile, and the recent incident had strained it further. They couldn't afford any more mistakes. The discovery. The peace was shattered again when an unidentified signal began emanating from deep beneath the surface of Erythian 5. It wasn't human. It wasn't Scolari. Both factions immediately suspected the other of staging a provocation, but neither side could decode the signal. Jack's commanding officer, Admiral Greaves, summoned him to the Coalition's flagship, Vanguard, to discuss the matter. On board the gleaming, cutting-edge battleship, Greaves didn't mince words. We've intercepted the signal, Carter, Greaves said, his voice gruff. It's old, alien, and potentially dangerous. Whatever it is, we need to secure it before the Scolari do. You've gotten close to their leadership. Use that to our advantage. Jack frowned. With all due respect, Admiral, this isn't the time for power plays. If this signal is a threat, we should be working together. Greaves snorted. The Scolari are unpredictable and hostile. If you think they'll cooperate, you're more naive than I thought. Jack didn't argue, but his frustration was clear. As he left the meeting, he sent a message to Terran, who was already en route to investigate the signal. They agreed to meet at the source. The descent. The signal was coming from an ancient underground structure, buried beneath the surface of Erythian 5. Jack and Terran arrived separately, but their teams joined forces reluctantly. The humans and Scolari exchanged wary glances as they set up camp near the entrance, a massive stone door covered in strange, glowing runes. "This isn't Scolari architecture," Terran said, running her fingers over the symbols. "It's far older." Jack nodded, examining the runes. "I've seen similar markings on other precursor ruins, but this is different, more intact." The door responded to their presence, its runes flaring to life. With a low rumble, it slid open, revealing a dark corridor that led deep into the moon's core. A faint hum echoed from within, matching the mysterious signal. Terran glanced at Jack, her golden eyes gleaming. "Still think we shouldn't be working together, human?" Jack smirked. "I never said that. Let's see what we're dealing with." Inside the structure, the team moved cautiously through the ancient halls, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air was heavy with the weight of history, and the hum of the signal grew louder as they descended. Strange symbols lined the walls, pulsating with a faint, rhythmic glow. Terran's wings twitched as she scanned their surroundings. These carvings, they're not just decorative. They're a warning. "A warning for what?" Jack asked, his voice low. Before Terran could answer, one of the human soldiers stepped on a pressure plate. The ground shook violently, and the walls lit up with blinding light. A deep, mechanical voice filled the chamber, speaking in an alien tongue. Terran's eyes widened. "It's activating." From the shadows, mechanical guardians emerged, towering constructs of metal and energy. Their limbs crackled with electricity as they advanced on the team, their glowing eyes locked on the intruders. The battle. Chaos erupted. The guardians attacked with precision, their energy weapons cutting through armor and walls alike. Humans and Scolari fought side by side, their differences forgotten in the face of a common enemy. Terran moved like a blur, her small size and agility making her a difficult target. She darted between the guardians, striking with her plasma blades and taking them down piece by piece. Jack covered her, his rifle blasting away at the construct's weak points. "Terran, any ideas on how to stop these things?" Jack shouted over the noise. "There's always a control mechanism in precursor ruins," she replied, dodging a strike. "We need to find it fast." Jack nodded. "Cover me. I'll find it." While Terran and the others held off the guardians, Jack sprinted deeper into the structure. The signal grew stronger, its hum now a deafening roar. He reached a central chamber where a massive console stood, glowing with alien energy. "Here goes nothing," he muttered, activating the console. The guardians froze, their weapons falling silent. The team regrouped, breathing heavily as the danger subsided. But Jack's relief was short-lived as the console displayed a holographic map of the galaxy. Red dots began to appear, each one representing a similar structure. "This wasn't just a warning," Jack said, his voice grim. "It's a network, and it's waking up." The fallout. As the team exited the structure, the implications of their discovery weighed heavily on them. The signal had been a call, and now it had been answered. Whatever the precursors had built, it wasn't meant to be found. Terran approached Jack, her expression uncharacteristically serious. "This changes everything. If these structures are all connected, it's not just about Erythian 5 anymore. This could affect the entire galaxy." Jack nodded. "And we just poked the hornet's nest." They both knew that their respective factions would want to control the technology, regardless of the risks. But for the first time, Jack and Terran were united in their determination to prevent a catastrophe. Chapter 4. The Reckoning. The winds of change swept across Erythian 5 as Jack Carter and Terran returned to their respective camps. Their teams were bruised and exhausted, but what they carried back with them, a recording of the precursor network and its ominous activation, was more dangerous than any weapon. The discovery was too big to contain. Both the United Terran Alliance and the Scolari Empire demanded immediate access to the data. What was intended as a joint exploration had quickly devolved into political brinkmanship. Divided loyalties. Jack's commanding officer, Admiral Greaves, summoned him for a debrief aboard the Vanguard. The Admiral's stern face filled the screen in Jack's quarters. "You did well, Carter," Greaves began, his voice cold. "The data you've brought back confirms our suspicions. The precursors were building weapons far beyond our comprehension. We need to secure those technologies before the Scolari get their claws on them." Jack frowned. "With all due respect, Admiral, we don't know what activating those structures will do. We're talking about galaxy-spanning consequences." "That's not your concern," Greaves snapped. "Your job is to ensure human interests are protected, and that means securing this tech by any means necessary." Jack cut the transmission, disgusted. His instincts told him that Greaves saw the precursor network not as a threat, but as an opportunity, one that could tilt the balance of power in humanity's favor, regardless of the cost. Meanwhile, aboard the Emberfang, Terran faced similar pressure from her second-in-command, Karn. "This is our chance, Commander," Karn said, pacing the war room. "The humans will use this discovery to destroy us if we don't act first. We must claim the network before they do." Terran's wings flickered in irritation. "And what if activating it destroys us all? These are precursor systems. They're not meant to be controlled." "Then we die fighting," Karn growled. "Better to fall as warriors than to kneel before the humans." Terran dismissed him with a sharp gesture, her thoughts drifting to Jack. Despite her instincts to distrust him, she couldn't ignore the alliance they had forged in the depths of the ruin. Jack had risked his life to protect both their teams, and his warnings about the network rang true. She made her decision. It was time to meet Jack alone. The confrontation. Under the cover of night, Terran slipped away from her camp and met Jack in a neutral zone between their territories. The tension between them was palpable, but there was also an unspoken understanding. "We can't let this fall into their hands," Jack said bluntly, skipping pleasantries. "Neither the Alliance nor the Empire understands what they're dealing with. They'll weaponize it, and when they lose control, we'll all pay the price." Terran nodded. "I agree, but convincing my people or yours won't be easy." Jack's gaze was steady. "Then we do it ourselves. We destroy the network." Terran's wings flared slightly in surprise. "Destroy it? The entire network spans the galaxy. Even if we knew how, it would take dash." "I found something," Jack interrupted, pulling out a data pad. "The central node. Every structure in the network is connected to one core system, an ancient relay station in uncharted space. If we take it out, the rest will go offline." Terran studied the data, her expression grim. "And how long before our people realize we're gone? They'll send fleets after us." "Let them," Jack said, his voice firm. "This isn't about politics anymore. It's about survival." Terran's gaze softened, and she offered a faint smile. "You're either the bravest human I've ever met or the most reckless." Jack smirked. "Why not both?" The journey to the relay. Stealing away from their respective factions wasn't easy. Jack and Terran had to disable tracking devices, evade patrols, and take only their most loyal crew members. They commandeered a small, stealth-capable Scolari frigate for the journey, knowing it would attract less attention than a human ship. The journey through uncharted space was perilous. The relay station was hidden in a nebula filled with gravitational anomalies and energy storms. The crew worked tirelessly to navigate the hazards, their small ship buffeted by violent winds and plasma surges. Terran spent much of the journey at Jack's side, her wings folded tightly against her back. Despite the danger, she found herself drawn to his quiet determination. He wasn't just a soldier or a diplomat, he was someone who cared deeply, even for those who weren't his own. "You're different from the other humans I've met," she admitted one evening, her voice quiet. Jack glanced at her. "And you're different from the Scolari I've met." Terran chuckled softly. "Careful, Carter. That almost sounded like a compliment." "Almost," Jack replied, his grin teasing. The final battle. When they reached the relay station, it was more massive than they had imagined, a sprawling, ancient structure floating in the heart of the nebula. Its pulsating core cast an eerie glow across the ship as they approached. The station's defenses came online immediately. Automated turrets and drone swarms attacked their ship, forcing them into a desperate firefight. Terran took command of the ship's weapons, her precision and speed rivaling the station's AI. Jack led a small team to board the station, their goal to plant charges on the relay's core. The corridors were a maze of ancient machinery and alien glyphs, but Jack pressed on, his focus unyielding. As they reached the core, a voice filled the chamber, alien, yet hauntingly familiar. The station's AI had awakened. "You are unworthy," it said. "You cannot control what you do not understand. Leave, or be destroyed." Jack ignored the warning, setting the charges with Terran's help. But the station wasn't bluffing. Massive mechanical constructs emerged, their energy weapons scorching the air as they attacked. Terran fought with all the ferocity of her people, her plasma blades slicing through metal and sparks. Jack covered her, his rifle blazing as they defended the charges. The core's hum grew louder, the entire station trembling as the countdown ticked down. "Jack!" Terran shouted. "We need to move now." They sprinted for the extraction point as the charges detonated. The explosion rippled through the station, sending shockwaves that shattered its structure. Their ship barely escaped the nebula as the relay collapsed into itself, the network severed. A new era. Back aboard the frigate, Jack and Terran watched the relay's destruction from the viewport. The glow of its collapse faded into the nebula, leaving only silence. "It's done," Jack said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "For now," Terran replied. "But our people will demand answers. They won't forgive us easily." Jack met her gaze. "Then we face them together." Terran's golden eyes softened, and she nodded. Together. Though they had defied their factions, Jack and Terran knew they had made the right choice. The galaxy would remain a dangerous place, but for the first time, they had hope, a fragile, hard-won hope that peace was possible. The end.